And welcome, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining this event. As you know, this is the WHU Entrepreneurship Center's Startup School. It's our second workshop that we put on. We had one last semester on starting as a student, and this is the first one of the spring on working with technical teams. If you don't know me, my name is Garrett McGowan. About 6 months ago, I took over the role of managing director of the center. We've kind of spent the past 5 or 6 months developing a broad strategy for the center, really trying to expand the program. So over the course of this semester and the next few years, you're going to see a lot more opportunities to participate in things like this and some bigger programs as well. We've recently taken over the incubator program, which we're revamping, bringing in alumni mentors along the way. This summer, we'll be launching our first WHU accelerator program. We have a ton of other different trainings, workshops, access to capital programs. There's some alumni working on seed funding for WHU startups, and there is a ton of activity. So for those of you that are going to be around campus, Pollendar and Dusseldorf next year, you're going to get to experience a lot of this firsthand. And for those of you that are or will be alumni at that time, do not worry. Of course, all of these resources are for you as well. So it's students and alumni are our customers. So we're here to serve you. And based on the experience of kind of I think interviewing about 120 different people for the strategy, one of the things that we identified that a lot of people wanted for our entrepreneurial ecosystem is access to more training that maybe you don't necessarily get in the classroom. And in talking to a lot of people on what some of that training is, one of the things that came up was how to work with technical teams. You know, there's a lot of great business minds at WHU, but you know, oftentimes people are working on a new venture and the first thing they're trying to learn is how to recruit, how to engage, and how to manage engineers and other technical resources. So that's why we decided this was going to be one of our first workshops where we can kind of take a deep dive into this topic. What I'd like to go over a few kind of house rules and about the agenda before we kind of kick things off, and I'll pass it on to our esteemed guests. The way this workshop's going to take place, it's going to be a little different. We all agreed that we don't like just sitting, listening, and watching PowerPoint presentations for an hour. So our speakers are kind of taking a little bit of a different format. They're going to be kind of riffing off each other, taking on particular roles of product and tech, using a real world example and kind of talking about the alternatives along the way. They'll be doing that for the next 45 minutes to an hour. After that time is up, we're going to take about a 5-minute break so they can catch their breath. But more importantly, that'll give all of you an opportunity to kind of type in questions. We're going to reserve the second half of the time for a deep dive Q&A where we can kind of have a more open dialogue. So I'll ask you guys to type in your questions. I won't be reading them off, but I'll be able to go through them that way, and I'll call on people and let you ask Philip and Vamsi the questions yourself, and we can engage in as good of an open dialogue as we possibly can with this many people. So I would ask that everybody keep their mics muted unless they are asking a question. And before I introduce the speakers, Janine Heinrich is here. She's the marketing manager of the Entrepreneurship Center, and she asked if we could all, just for a moment, turn on our cameras. She's going to take a group photo. You can all turn on the cameras and smile. I'm going to pass it on to Janine so she can spearhead this quick initiative.
Yes, just if you could all turn it on really, really quickly. I'll do a couple of screenshots and then I'll tell you when you can turn your cameras off again if you'd like. Although it would be great if you could keep your cameras on for the presenters as well.
Do we make funny faces?
We'll do one serious and then you can do one funny face, whatever you want. So I'll start with the first one being serious. So 1 second. One more, still serious, and then you can have a fun one. Okay. And then you guys can now do a funny one if you'd like. Alrighty, and one more. Alrighty. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it.
All right. Cool, guys. Well, let's kick things off. I'd like to start by introducing our guests. Some of them you may know, some you may not know. First, I'd like to introduce Philip von Hammerstein. If you guys listen to our Most Awesome Founder podcast, you've probably heard his story before. Philip is an alum of WHU, both bachelor's and master's in management. He's also a full stack web developer. He helped spearhead the launch of Le Wagon Code Academy in Berlin, worked for Code University of Applied Sciences, and is now a senior product manager at the high growth startup in Berlin called Doctorly. Vamsi Wuppalapati. He is a Kellogg-WHU EMBA, has built products for some really significant brands, Lazada, Rentomojo, HelloFresh, Urban Sports. He's a partner at Unit Ventures. He's a mentor at the Founder Institute, and he has built some companies from the ground up to over 100 million run rate. So both of these guys have experience building a whole ton of products and have seen, I'm sure, successes and plenty of pain points along the way, which they're going to cover for you now. So enough of me talking. I'll pass it on to Philip and Vamsi.
Garrett, thank you so much for the kind introduction. Just as a quick FYI, somehow 5 minutes ago, the world started to, well, fall apart here in Berlin, and few lightning strikes were rather close to my home, so my internet connection is a bit unstable right now. There is a minimum risk that I have to rejoin on my phone, but we'll manage. So welcome everyone to Working with Technical Teams. Thank you so much, Garrett, for organizing this. As always, it's an absolute pleasure to be here, and Vamsi and I couldn't be more excited to share some of our knowledge. I'm going to share the presentation now, and then I invite Vamsi to introduce himself. Here we go.
Yeah. Hey guys, I'm Vamsi. I think Jared has given all the information about me. Nothing much. We can probably connect on LinkedIn to deep dive further. One of the best parts that have happened, after me traveling to Germany and started working in Berlin, is definitely becoming a part of WHU and the community. The way it's such a entrepreneurial, bustling community, and if you are living in Berlin, especially, like you go work in a startup, the chances of meeting a co-founder at WHU who are from WHU is at least 40%. So that's the kind of leverage WHU has created for the whole German, or rather these days, European startup ecosystem. Being part of the ecosystem, I'm super happy to give back and also, becoming content and learn from you guys as much as possible. So we are all trying to do a little bit of, whatever we have learned from our side, so that you guys can be the next, future leaders to create great value for the whole ecosystem in the world. Thanks a lot. And with further ado, before I pass it on to Philip once again, what we are trying to do quickly over here is Philip has got some great idea where he's come up with a business case. And what we're going to do is, like, we both are going to take 2 senior leadership roles of that particular company in the case. And we will try to help you to understand, if you do a startup, from tomorrow onwards, and if you have raised a capital in seed, then, how the whole conversations would happen between you being a product guy or a CEO and a CTO or a tech guy. That's what we are trying to do over here. And we're going to keep it as casual as possible, but it is not going to be super gentle. We are trying to, pull each our strings and see as much as the whole session is going to be much more interactive.
Workshop with the help. What's up?
So with further ado, thanks a lot once again, and I pass it on to Philip.
Thank you very much, Vamsi. Quick information about me. As Garrett said, Bachelor Master at WHU, founded 3 companies, worked in venture capital for a while, and then over time made my way over to the coding side of things. Worked at Le Wagon, built up the coding bootcamp here in Berlin, which a lot of WHU students and alumni have visited already, then switched over to Code University, built up the learning platform there where the whole university is organized within 100 days, which was an interesting experience. Then freelanced a while, and right now I'm senior product manager, and actually recently switched to head of product at Doctorly, where we built software for doctors' practices. And yeah, really excited to be here. Thank you so much again, Garrett, and let's jump in. To make this a bit more graspable, a bit more interesting, hopefully also for everyone, we are using a case, as Vamsi said, and we're planning to build a white label rental housing marketplace like Airbnb, but for closed communities. Airbnb is fantastic, but over the last few years, it's become just as expensive as a hotel room. And I think there's a lot of people who kind of like the idea, but are not willing to pay the price. And that's why we decided closed communities. So for example, the WHU community, an alternative would be entrepreneurs within Germany, or soccer players within Germany, any kind of, at the end of the day, closed community. We want to build a rental housing marketplace for them, with the USP that you get an amazing flat for a low price, because we're going to pin the price at 20 euros per night. So it doesn't matter whether you stay in my flat, which is in Berlin Mitte, very close to Alexanderplatz, whether you stay in the house of Oliver Samba, which is on the Tegernsee, or you chill out in Garrett's flat. Actually, mate, I don't know where you live, but I saw your flat and it looks amazing. You will only be paying 20 euros per night. This idea that Vamsi and I had over too much beer before the lockdown actually raised 500,000 in angel money, but based entirely on PowerPoint slides. So now we have this money in the bank and we need to go live in the next 100 days. Vamsi will be the CTO. He's volunteered to be the CTO after beer number 7. After beer number 8, I said I will do CPO. And we're going to call our first case WHU BSc for this. And from my perspective, Vamsi, I think what really matters is that being in such an early stage, and knowing that usually the first idea that you start out with will not be the idea that you actually end up with. I believe we should really focus on agile and lean principles, agile with a strong focus on individuals' interactions, on building working software and not just fantastic documentation, on collaborating with our customers and not negotiating ourselves to death. And this is, I think, extremely important. We got to make sure that we're extremely responsive to change. We keep iterating until we really hit product market fit. And at the same time, let's use the 3 basic principles of lean. So always build, measure, learn. I've seen too many companies failing to measure things, and I've seen it go wrong again and again and again. I hope we are aligned on this.
Philip, thanks a lot for this. We have been hearing a lot about agile and lean. This is all quite theoretical in my purview, right? It's more than what, probably a decade or more. It's also entered into the startups. Let's not talk about, what is better or what is not. Let's talk about our case situation. We are at the very early stage. We've got the money and we have to build it super quick. We don't know, like, if you cannot go with lean processes that were followed by manufacturing companies coming from Toyota, or agile companies that is coming from processes that is coming from companies like Oracle or Microsoft these days. I need to understand, what do you have as a product guy? Do you have something like, to materialize this in reality? Because I have a very small team. Of course, I do have a lean team of engineers, but I just don't get this. We have this everywhere. Throw me some light.
Sure. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Stacy matrix here over to the left. It basically looks at, okay, what is your project like on 2 dimensions, like any good consulting matrix is. It looks at the requirements, the what needs to be built, and then on the second dimension, it looks at the technology. How do we build this? And if both are very, very clear, and if it's very clear what we have to build, and we know exactly how we have to build this, this is a case where we could actually ignore Agile and go for the beautiful old waterfall model where you have a requirements catalog very clearly stating, okay, step 1, 2, 3, what do we need to do? Then it goes here into design, and we get the mock-ups as well as the architecture of the software. And then it's being implemented by the developers. Afterwards, the product people verify that this is actually what was supposed to be done. And then afterwards, it's maintenance only. And I think that I still love waterfall, and I think it's actually undervalued for a lot of things where projects are very, very clear. However, I think with us being so early stage and being not 100% clear, especially on the requirements, the technology we can discuss at a later point, but I think there's, at the end of the day, only 2 or 3 options that really make sense for us, but the requirements are rather unclear. My suggestion is not to go with Kanban, which we would usually do in a complicated products, but really to go with Scrum. Kanban, at the end of the day, would be we know exactly what we want to build, but we don't quite know how to build it. But at the end of the day, we have a very clear list of what's still pending here. And then we just need to burn down. So we need to finish all of these things. We need to check off all of these things, and then we're good to go. Whereas Scrum is a very iterative process. And one of the tenets and the most amazing thing about Scrum, from my perspective, is the focus on knowledge sharing. It's the focus on continuously improving and learning about your customer and improving your knowledge about your customer, and accordingly improving your product. So that would be my suggestion. Do you have experience with any of these?
Yes, absolutely. But I would also love to ask certain questions, right? So you
Sure.
said that you would love waterfall, and you also have given other options as Kanban and Scrum. So waterfall is pretty good when you have all the requirements ready, and there is a timeline for another 3 months. And in next 3 months, you take a very linear approach, step by step, and you follow it. It is very cool. But waterfall subsequently and substantially has become a failure, specifically when there are any sort of projects that are having time limitation, and you want to scale your businesses. You want to build your technological products, or you want to build your apps. It never worked out. Because it is a step-by-step, which means, like, as a designer, I really have to wait for all the requirements. And meanwhile, all the developers are waiting, what the designs are going to come with. So it's like really step-by-step, and I don't want to take it further. You can imagine like this. If you want to go step by step, then it is having a huge amount of time limitation. So it's totally ruled out from my angle. I'm not even, trying to take other examples to explain you. I hope, we both are leveraging on the same page. But Kanban versus Scrum looks a little more interesting because both are pretty specific for startups. Both works largely very well with small teams having a few developers and a product guy and a tester. But what situations do you suggest, a Kanban versus Scrum would be better? First of all, can you just throw a quick more definition on what is Kanban and what is Scrum, and then one or two pointers like, why you choose on what?
Absolutely. So both are, at the end of the day, agile frameworks, aka ways how to implement these agile principles that we talked about a few minutes ago. And I think the major difference is between those two is that in Scrum, in Kanban, I use either for these two complicated cases or when there's absolute chaos. So a good example for this was in the initial phases at Code University, where we built the learning platform. We had no idea what we actually had to build. And we had no idea which technology to use. And that meant that for the first actually 4 weeks, we were diving extremely quickly, extremely deeply into understanding what we need to build and into how can we build this. And their Kanban was fantastic because it was really just whatever we learned new, whatever we found as new tasks, we added to pending, and then went into analyzing, okay, what kind of impact does this have on us? And then we worked really hard on figuring out technological solutions. We were trying out a very new framework for our database management, which our lead developer was very, very much excited about, but we were just really not sure whether it could actually support what we wanted to do. Turned out it couldn't actually, but the new version, the version 2 of it, that was developed at that time, was able to. So we became, after 4 weeks, we made the call to actually become not even beta, but absolute alpha testers of that new technology, which reduced our technological uncertainty. And we had a better idea of, okay, so we probably need to build some sort of calendar feature. We need to build a calendar feature. We need to build a feature for the students to sign up to their classes and to sign up for assessments. And we need a feature for the professors to grade the students, and then for the students to see what kind of grades did I actually get. And that's when we realized it's still a very complex problem, but there wasn't complete chaos anymore around technology. We had made our decisions for implementation, and there was more clarity on the requirements. I still wouldn't say it was clear, but there was more clarity. And that was basically the decision when we switched to Scrum.
Okay, so that's where you have moved to Scrum, and especially with our current situation, we have just another 100 days to take the product to the market, which means like we have limited amount of budget. So we have 500K that we have raised, but at the same time we have 20% of that budget, which is like 100K to take it further, and we have a time limitation. So our use case is also a little different because we are not building a learning platform, which is also great. But here the use case is more about we are trying to build the communities, and especially the community is gonna have both supply side and market side. So for this, we have to build like two different verticals of the platforms. So do you think like, Kanban is better here and Scrum? Because I do have a vote towards Scrum, but what do you think about it and why?
I think for us, the good thing is the requirements are very clear. As the first iteration we want to build is really just a plain simple Airbnb clone, just that only people with the @whu.edu email address can sign up. The requirements are extremely clear. On the technological side, at the end of the day, that is yours, but I would assume that you have also some ideas on this already, and it is a rather straightforward implementation, again, at least for version 1.
Yeah,
that's why my gut feeling is leaning strongly towards Scrum.
Sure, let's go ahead. I'm super happy with this, and technologically, I'll also explain you what might be certain challenges and how we can cope it up. But super happy that we both are on the same page.
Fantastic. I think the important part here is to keep in mind when we talk about Agile, and I know you've seen this, I just like the two of us to be on the same side here, that we take this approach to Agile. So we don't have iteration 1 where we build a wheel and then we build 2 wheels with a platform and then we put a little bit of a chassis around it and then we have a car, but rather we see, okay, what is the smallest implementation possible? I could actually imagine that initially we just do this with a mailing list and people can send around, hi, I'm looking for a flat in Berlin from here, from start date to end date. And that would be a very, very simple first implementation that admittedly is not the most beautiful, but it's something that I can set up myself while you ramp up the technology team, you start building the first very small features. And I think, for example, payment, we can postpone to a significantly later date. And it might turn out that actually people do not want to pay per night. They rather pay a membership fee, which is then distributed to all members. I don't know yet, but that would be really important for me that when we talk about Agile, we do proper Agile, which means we start as small with as small shippable product as possible. And that for me would be a mailing list if you're fine with that.
Yeah, absolutely. If we even think about these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and divide those chunks into 20 days each, we should have certain amount of capacity and tenacity to understand, hey, first we will try to create a feature around mailing list and then we take it further as and when we speak with multiple users of our WHU community. Fantastic. I really love this.
Yeah, cool. Then thank you for being on par with me. As I've seen too many implementation, no, not too many, but a lot of different implementations of Scrum and Scrumban and well, Scrum resembling ideas. I just want to make sure we're on the same side here as well. So my suggestion is we start with the very, very basic Scrum, which means we have a product backlog where we store all the information on what we need to do. Then initially, my suggestion would be week. We do 1 week long sprints. So iterations where we say, okay, this week, this is what we're going to get done in the sprint planning meeting. Everything that we say we will get done, we move into the sprint backlog. We do this sprint for a week. Every day, every 24 hours, we have a Scrum meeting in the morning, just 5 minutes, really everyone saying, okay, this is what I'm doing today, and here are potential blockers that I have. And then at the end of the week, we will hopefully have finished everything that we committed to in the sprint planning meeting that has been in our sprint backlog. And we'll be able to review and retro our sprint. So in the review, the way I conduct my reviews is we really get together also in a best case with a couple of customers and show them, okay, this is what we built in this sprint. So initially in this first week, I know sprints are usually 2 weeks long. So I would assume that probably after 3 weeks, after 3 1-week sprints, we should move to a 2-week cycle here. But what have we accomplished in the review? What have we accomplished this week? Show this internally, but also to customers. get their feedback on it, and just make sure we're all happy and aligned. And then, and this for me cannot be overvalued, we do a proper sprint retrospective. We do a proper retro where we get everyone who was working during the sprint together, and we discuss, okay, how did this sprint go? What were things that went really well that we want to do more, but also what were things that went terrible that we want to stop doing effective immediately, to make sure that in each sprint, we get more and more productive. I think it's something that too many teams just put a bit on the back burner, and it can be an absolute powerhouse if you get a team to do good retros and just align on how can we work together the most effective way.
Okay, that's fantastic, Philip. Thanks a lot for putting it across. And my team over here, I've got like 2 front-end developers, 2 back-end developers, and a testing engineer. We are such a lean team, and they're not quite sure what is the difference between the product backlog and sprint backlog. How does it go through it? Can you just take a quick use case and explain that in a couple of minutes for us?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So product backlog is all of the ideas that we have for the product, anything that we want to build over time. So as I said, the payment, for example, the payment functionality is something that I definitely want to build over time, but I don't think it should go into any of the first iterations. Let's first see, where do our customers actually see the value in our product and have a willingness to pay? Is it the membership in there? Is it the actually staying the nights? I don't know yet. So everything, all the ideas go into the product backlog, and initially they're not really well defined. It can literally be payment. And then as we improve our understanding, as we improve our knowledge over time, what we do is we refine or groom all the backlog items, which means we get together and we discuss them. And we come up with different ideas. What could this be? And how could we implement this? And we keep on grooming these ideas. We keep on grooming these tickets, splitting them up more into, okay, what does it actually mean? And then once we believe that something is really ready to be developed, so we have a good enough understanding of what does payment actually mean for us, and in which context do we want to implement payment. And we believe that now is the time to implement it because, well, either we're running out of money or our users actually have such a high willingness to pay that we believe we should introduce this right now. That's when we have the sprint planning meeting, and the product owner, so in this case, myself initially, I will propose to say, okay, we should implement payment in this sprint. And then this gets discussed with the team, of course, and if we are all in agreement, then we decide, okay, which part of payment, because payment might be a very simple solution, just have a membership. You need to pay for a membership here. That is in very big quotation marks because nothing is ever really simple in technology, but this is rather simple. Whereas if we have, if we implement a payment system that is significantly more complex, where it's where we have transactions on a per night and we have to map them to the owner of the apartment and everything, the complexity increases. So we have to think, okay, how can we reduce, how can we build this more complex payment solution, but how can we build a rather simple first iteration of this?
So what you're trying to say is we have a payment feature which is typically going towards the product backlog, and we choose what are the top 3-4 items from that particular product backlog, what are the requirements of the payment feature, and we put into the sprint backlog. And that backlog, those
Correct.
features are going towards getting developed, right? So that's what my team is
Yes.
going to develop. Is that my understanding right? Great.
That is correct. The important part there is, I don't want your team to overcommit. So whatever sharedly decide to put into the sprint, we should feel confident that this can be delivered within these 1 or 2 weeks of the sprint.
Okay. It's great, but I'll tell you something, on a hindsight, as an engineering lead, that my team doesn't really like top down. Hey, the product guy is bringing everything to us. Probably we would go and talk to the business once again on our own. So they might not like it. So how does the sprint backlog, coordination, or I would say like finalization, happen? Is it coming only from the product and the scrum master over there, or it's going to be a collaborative aspect? Just to find out, and that's my only final question.
Yeah, I think actually the collaboration has to start even earlier. The collaboration has to start at the understanding the backlog, working hard on the grooming and refinement together. Everyone should be in this grooming and refinement in order to actually have a better understanding of the customers. I think it's absolutely crucial that developers spend time in customer interviews, in understanding really the customers. I know that when Airbnb started, and I think they probably do this to this day, every employee had a certain amount of money they could spend every year on they were expected to spend every year on Airbnb. So they could go to different houses, to different flats, and just have the Airbnb experience and see how can they do this better. And for me, it would be really important that we do something similar so that everyone of the team really experiences the product and experience also the customer pains, so that that we really have a shared agreement on what should we work on next, because we've all experienced this.
Sure. Just to be sure, because we are getting this money from the investors, and investors will be on our head because they are trying to get a demo at the end of these 2 weeks. So you spoke about willingness to pay and going with that nudge. We are trying to take it further. If the users are gonna, hit back hard, where the willingness to pay is not coming in, then we really should be able to, push back and, realign on what is the better next feature that we have to build and scrapping this off. Do you agree on this?
Absolutely. 100%. I think this is something where, it's continuous learning. This is the point of Scrum. We just have to continuously improve our understanding, improve our knowledge of the customers, of the value proposition, of everything. So I think one more thing that is really important for me is to just quickly align how do we organize our product backlog, because there again I've seen very different implementations. This is the way I would suggest. It's a very standard way where initially you just have a theme that could be payment again, to stick with it. We have epics that are probably I can pay money and I can receive money. And then we have user stories, which are as a user, I can book or I can pay for a flat. And if you break this down further, it's as a user, I can select or I can submit my credit card details. And as a user, I can get an invoice. And then the second epic, which is about receiving payments, is as a user, I can submit my bank details. As a user, I can request a payout. And these are the user stories. And then we break those down into really, and this is of course the task of the technology team, to break these user stories further down into actual tasks that need to be done. And from an estimation, so the estimations I love to do, because at the end of the day, we need to know how quickly can we launch, and will we make it in 100 days? Usually the way I like to do this is initially for the high level overview, we just do estimations in t-shirt sizes, small, medium, and large. on how complex is this. Then for the user stories, I love story points. So if we go with the Fibonacci, is it Fibonacci? I want to say Fibonacci sequence.
Yeah.
So 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21.
Yeah.
To account for complexity. And I think this is really important because a user story, they don't have, usually for user stories, you don't have linear complexity that you can say, this is a 1, this is a 2, and this is a 3, this is a 4, this is a 5, and that's the scale you have. The less you know, and the more complex something is, the higher the number should be. That's why I think for story points, it makes so much sense to go with a Fibonacci sequence.
How would my engineering team choose which particular story point has to be assigned to what user story? How does that work? Or is that going to happen on a task level or on a user story level? I
like to do the story points on a user story level, and I've seen different implementations. There is a very simple one where the CTO just gives story points, so it would be you. My preferred approach to story points is actually poker planning, which I assume you've done before. So I, as the PO, will sit down and introduce a user story. As a book, as a user, I can submit my bank detail. I can submit my bank details so I can receive payments. And then once everyone has been able to ask their questions, so for example, will this always be an IBAN, or do we already have to think about American bank accounts as well, which are completely different to the German ones or to the European ones? And if you ask me, an absolute clusterfuck of complexity. But if we assume, okay, we have discussed this user story and there is a very clear understanding from the technical side, then we go around the room and each developer basically says, okay, for me, this is a 5, or for me, this is a 3, or for me, this is an 8. And from my experience, but do correct me if you see this differently, it's often that this is evolving over time. Initially, these estimates can be quite different between developers, but latest 3 months into development, almost all estimates are the same. I think that's the beauty of estimation, because we in Scrum there is something called retrospective after 2 weeks of product development. In that 2 weeks, you would be able to iterate constantly, like, hey, the understanding of user story is coming better from the product guy, or the product guy is not clear enough with explaining the requirements, the value prop, what are the success metrics that are coming in, so that the whole engineering team is able to choose, understand the complexity and severity of the features better. And no one knows at the first time. It comes only with iteration. Cool. With further ado, I'm super happy with Scrum. We should be able to knock it, but also please try to understand it's overly democratic, and I'm putting it on your shoulders to work with my engineering team, and we can take it further. Fantastic. Then let's just keep one thing in mind for all these Agile, whatever framework you use to implement Agile, the goal is really to have continuous discovery and delivery. Not just say, okay, this is what we're going to build, and then sit down for 6 months and build it, and then go out and realize nobody wants this. This has to be continuous. So for me, one of the main questions towards you is, would you make or buy this? So you have a team, but how do you approach this? Yeah, that's a very important question that my investors always ask, or my CEO asked me, because we have a very lean team and we have a very massive vision that we have to take it further. So we have to really look into multiple parameters, Philip, on this. There are so many frameworks, parameters. Let's trash all the possible theory or frameworks aside for now. Let's look into our typical case. We have WHU BSc, right? So we are just a team of
what, 5 engineering team, you being one product guy, we have our CEO, and who's going to take care of sales, marketing, and customer experience team with 2 people. So largely we are just 10 people team, and we just have another 100 days to go and get our traction. So which means that there are certain parameters that we need to acknowledge and we have to consider so that we create a map. So you can imagine about matrix and doing a comparison. So I try to keep it as simple as possible and on a very top level. So what I'm trying to look at is looking at, development effort, because we have a small team and we have so much to build. We need to understand on that parameter. And then second parameter is like, of course, we have only 20% of 500K that we have raised, which is like 100K. Out of this 100K, how well we are going to utilize these resources in terms of finance, sorry. And then we need to understand, whether our product that we are trying to build initially or an MVP that we are trying to build initially is for short term, mid term, or long term. And are we taking a product approach or a service approach? Service approach can be something like, there are multiple companies like Accenture, McKinsey Digital, BCG, from Digital Ventures, or you can also have, Infosys. So all these companies are service oriented. Product oriented is something where, you're building a product which is literally solving the market problems, which in turn turns into a startup towards a successful startup, which is a product like Airbnb, or it can be something like DoorDash or Delivery Hero, HelloFresh, and so forth. So because we are looking at WHU BNB and we are not just creating a marketplace to provide services for our WHU community, we are also leveraging the technology to enable all these services. And to leverage the technology, we probably rather get into a product side is what I think, or I'm looking at. But let's try to quickly
maybe
sorry,
jumping in there.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a black or white decision, or
No,
do you think there is a parts that we could buy and parts that we could make?
Right. This is not a black or white decision for long term, but this is gonna be a black or white decision for short term. And the black or white is gonna be based on certain qualitative and quantitative parameters, not just because, hey, I love white color, so let me go ahead with that. So that's where I'm trying to look into it. And also with the time constraint that we have got, we have to really look into in a very pragmatic and quantitative assessment too. Sorry. So if you look into this particular slide, you have a matrix which has got make versus buy, and you have these 4 parameters. So I'll quickly take it forward to you with the kind of use case that we have taken. Let's talk payment use case. So we have to provide the payment feature for our WHU community so that, the moment they onboard, immediately they go through a membership or a subscription model rather these days, and we should be able to take it further to the market. So for that, either I have my engineering team to make it, or we can just go, take third-party services that are available, which can be in the form of a consulting service, or it can be in the form of a third-party product. But largely because we are a startup and our product feature is very unique with the subscription payment feature, I don't think the existing Stripes or checkout.coms would be able to enable us. So that's where we have to think about. But if you look into make, once again, there is some substantial effort that has to come into picture because our engineering team is going to work on it. But if you look into buying it, hardly our engineering team doesn't have any effort, right? So I would rather go, to have no effort. But at the same time, from the business perspective and product perspective, it's like they would just do that particular product feature and then they go off. And what would happen at the end of it, all sorts of maintenance, product effort, we don't know, and it is not just service. So development effort angle, it is medium from our side. But at the same time, if you want to go and buy that particular dev access, which is taking the help of some consulting companies, it would be super less. So that's where we are here, medium versus less. We are not yet making any decision over here. Let's go through all the 4 parameters, and then we can quickly make an assessment, or if you have any questions, we can take it forward. So
Fantastic.
we spoke about development, Philip, okay? But cost, I constantly iterate this because investors always juggle my head, like, hey, we have given you so much of money, what do you do it? From cost angle, the way I'm going to deal with my engineering team, or I'm going to put it across to the consulting team, is almost going to be similar. It's not going to be super high, largely because we are dealing with an MVP. We are not trying to scale it through 1 million users, where each user is going to give us like $10, and we have a 10 million GMV by the end of the year. We are not looking at it. We are trying to prove our mettle to by creating some value to the WHU community. So the cost becomes almost even for make versus buy. And then, is that going to be a short term or a long term one? So it is super straightforward. We have to build something in 100 days. So in 100 days, if we are not going to build the product, take it to the market, get the traction, show a certain amount of revenues and interest and feedback, we are not going to raise our seed capital. Forget about seed capital. We are not going to create any value. It's going to be a dump down of our whole WHU community. Like, we are not providing any service. So that's where we are trying to keep it short term. And in this short term, we are not the capability, whether we're going to create it with our engineering team or we're going to take some consulting mode, is going to be, similar. But now the most important aspect that we are trying to take it further is, like, especially as an engineering lead, I genuinely believe we have to take a product angle, though we are providing services, as I've told you just some time back. So I envision WHU BNB as a product, so that people would just be using that as an app rather than just as a service that people just come onto the website and go further and use it for usage and making. They're providing they are in return giving us some revenues. Rather, if it is a product, it's not just revenue, it has some certain value creation. There is certain amount of customer angle. We can gather a lot of data, and constantly we can scale and do a lot of iteration. Service is like, it is very linear in nature. So yeah. I go with product, which means, like, we have to build it internally, so that we literally demolish all sorts of external dependencies, keeping 3 main factors: A, the timeline that we have got; B, the kind of investors, angels confidence that we have got; 3, most importantly, the value that we're going to create for our WHU community. What do you think?
I fully agree. And I think when you talk about value, I think it's not only the value we're of course creating for the WHU community, but also the intellectual property, the product we're building is worth significantly more if we actually have built the solution ourselves in this case, because it makes it significantly more scalable, significantly more adaptable. And as we're building a product where we don't know which direction it's going to go, I think you're absolutely right. While we're on the topic of your team, to be honest, I've been struggling so hard with, or I was, especially years ago, I was struggling so hard with hiring good engineers. I think there's so many engineers, but they're really hard to, it's really hard to find the good ones, especially for a startup, because you need a certain mentality for this. You need certain skills, you need a pragmatic approach. So what's your recommendation there?
Let's jump into, how we can rather think from a different angle, because our situation here is just a startup and we are trying to experiment. At this particular phase, what do we do? So it is about, like, whether and where we are gonna, hire people. How do we take it for the interviews? And also, how do we take assessment? How do you do an assessment in order to hire someone, right? There is no black and blue once again, or white and black once again on this. It depends on the needs. It depends on multiple factors. It depends on the situation. It depends on the availability, geography. So many factors could come into picture. But, out of so many other factors and opportunities that we have got, we rather discuss only 3 or 4 certain ways on how we can initially do an outreach for finding an engineer or a technological person. And the moment we do an outreach, when we acquire certain people with some interest, then how do we actually scrutinize them, or rather work with them in order to see whether it is going to be a good match or not. I'm not going to
Really good question, because I have no idea.
Okay, I'm not going to deep dive much into it. So let's imagine this, right? So what are we? Sorry, yeah. So who are we? We are, largely from the WHU community, right? So as we are from the WHU community, one of the best things that we can do is like, within our community, there are so many entrepreneurs, and they have so many people working with them or work with them. So reaching out with the network. The second aspect is, as a CTO or even, as a product guys, the best thing that we can do is like, constantly blog. And beautiful aspect currently is like we have Substacks, we have Mediums, we have LinkedIn Pulses. There is so much of reach that we can do it with by blogging. And vlogging is the new trend that is also over there. We can just pitch so that a lot of people can get interested.
Should we do a TikTok?
Why not? Why not? If we know that at a certain geolocation, there are a certain amount of people spending around 1 to 2 hours during their work timings, we can also do it. Why not? Let's TikTok the beauty. It's a great idea, in fact, because they'd also understand how funny we are to work with, right? Because it's not just work versus earning some money versus some success. It's all about, the process of, building something substantial and going through that entire learning with fun. LinkedIn is a no-brainer recommendation. It has created so much of power and impact, but there is a secret sauce. The secret sauce is doing internal meetups and special interest communities. If you really look into it, the whole world is communicating till 5 years back largely on Facebook or chats, global chats and messengers. But right now the world is really communicating within the communities. We have communities within. We have communities. You have like VC angle, you have the technological community, you have entrepreneurial community, you have consulting community. The same way world is really talking within their special interest community. And there is so much like Stack Overflow. There are so many other communities that you can outreach. Telegram has got amazing. If you're hiring a backend tech developer, full stack developer, you have full stack dev community within Telegram, within the geographical area of Berlin. So that's where we should be able to reach out. Finally, imagine that we have acquired, some 100, 200 people. How do you really look into, working with them and identifying them? Because it's actually going to be a very tough process. Outreach is still a decent thing that you can generate. Is all about marketing and sales and how do we pitch, but understanding them is going to be super important. And the talent is there available across the globe. It is not just Berlin or Boston or Bangalore. It's everywhere, right? And it's only about how do we work with them. First thing is like we have to be super clear what is that particular product that we're gonna build, not the short term, what we have discussed earlier. It is gonna be like midterm to long term. For another 1 to 2 years, if you want to build an amazing WHU BNB app on par with technological excellence of Airbnb, you can also call it as a clone. But if it is it is serving the needs of WHU community, it is great. For that, we have to look at least another 18 to 24 months. What is the technological landscape that can change and how the future tech enablement would come into picture. So that's where we have to be super clear with our requirements. Second thing is relevant experience. It doesn't mean that relevant experience is only coming from the big tech. Relevant experience can also come from failed companies. There are so many failed companies who have raised capital or reached out to the market for till Series A, Series B, or they have run the business for 1 to 2 years. But because of Corona, the whole real estate industry has fallen down, and the whole travel industry has fallen down. There are so many people who would have really worked on them, and we can plug in them to understand their past experience, the relevant skills. You have to talk with product guys all around, experience from product, engineering, backend, data science, developers, so on and so forth. The third most important thing largely is the attitude, Philip. Why? Because startup is not just, hey, you're just gonna have some fun and you're gonna become a CTO or a CPA in just 2 to 3 years. It's an attitude, which is like you're gonna be there, you understand the risks of it. It is not going to be super structured like Google or Microsoft's. It's got to be a daily chaos. No one knows what is going to happen after 3 months. You might also end up not having a salary after 2 months. You have to go through all this, which means like we have to sell our vision at the same time, understand someone really love it. Imagine that there is a WHU guy who's done, bachelor's from WHU and gone to booking.com, becoming a technological program manager and became an engineering lead by learning Python. And then they have all the tenacity to give back to the community and be part of it, create something valuable. Then that's an attitude, and they don't really care about losing out a six-figure salary. So these are the things that you have to look into. It's not just generic skills, but this is what I would look at. What do you think?
I love the idea. I have one question though. In product, we say hire for attitude, train for skills. Because honest to God, anyone who's motivated enough and driven enough, I can rather quickly skill up. Do you see something similar in technology, or do you think you always have to hire people with exactly the right tech stack that we have decided on?
Yeah, sure. But pardon me for my comment now. Product, if you look into it, you guys would be able to scale yourself, on quarterly basis, because you are working on one single feature for 2 months, 3 months, and then you try to do a certain amount of research, and then you want to come up with some new feature. Apart from a payment feature, you want to put that across towards, micro, financing feature and so on and so forth. But with engineers, the learning scaling happens every day, because constantly the engineers are programming and they have to do a lot of research on web. At the same time, they work very closely with their peers by peer programming methods, so on and so forth. And they have to come up with all new tech stack, which is constantly changing. So that's where, the whole attitude of learning every day would also come into picture. And that is much more granular and, daily recursive in nature for engineers compared to product or even data scientists.
Fantastic. Yeah, that sounds really good. So before we actually start hiring people, we should probably take one step back and think about who should we or do we want to hire? Do you have a proposal on that?
Okay. So you wanna take it further? I might speak it up in the next slide.
All right, sure.
Right. So that's where we are talking about the whole team structure, right? So you would have you are a product guy. You're coming with your requirements. I can boast myself as a CTO, but what do I do? I cannot code all the time, and we have limited amount of time, right? So we have to build an MVP. And we do have a feature like payment feature, which has a front-end aspect that users are gonna use that, download the app, do their payments. And there is also a back-end aspect where constantly a platform has to be triggered and understand the performance. Like if you have 100,000, we have users coming all of a sudden in 3 months versus just 10 users, we have users today. So the whole backend has to be built in a very, asynchronous or even synchronous way as well. But it depends on what my backend developer would say. So the backend developers and the front-end developers would have built this feature, but someone has to test it. Because if I talk to my front-end developers, they would say like, hey, Vamsi, I've done my stuff. I'm a golden geek coming from Google. I know everything. Don't worry about it. I've also tested for 2 hours. But the lens of a tester is totally different. Imagine the Sherlock Holmes story. Sherlock Holmes has a lens of being a detective, so that his assistant or his client who's provided all the information, they really don't know the in-depth integrities. So that's where the QA guy would come into picture and understand each and every feature, not just from the technological angle, but also from the user angle. Hey, if you're a user called, Jared, and if Jared comes in and he clearly becomes a subscriber, throughout his journey from onboarding to doing the payment and becoming a subscriber and providing the feedback, what are the plus and minus of the product? Are there any hiccups, or are there any issues, or something really substantial, great product that has been developed? That's where you require a QA guy. But even before all this, the product, as a product guy, you would have worked with a designer so that our engineering team or my life would have become easy, that you have built certain amount of markups. You can use substantial amount of tools and markups. So that's where we are a team. You can call it as a Scrum team, you can call it as a Kanban team. We are just a team, though we are fighting a lot on our getting into synergies and on our thought processes, but we have to work as a team to take the product further. Further due, if you are okay with it, we can probably talk about what are the kind of tools that we can use, or if you have any questions here.
Sounds good. No, I fully agree. I think in the very, very first stages, probably in the best case, you find a product person. So I actually can do some UI and UX design. Will it be perfect? No, but will it be sufficient for our version 1? Yes. And I can do at least the manual testing. I mean, QA, you usually split into automated testing and manual testing. I can at least do the manual testing myself. But to be honest, I think with the money we've raised and with the goals we have for the company, we should be looking into hiring sooner rather than later. But before we jump into the tools,
sorry to interrupt, Philip, but anyways, till the time we hire, you're going to be the designer, you're going to be the tester here, right?
Yeah.
So, bingo.
Before we jump into the tools, I have one more question.
Sure.
Where basically, or something I would like to discuss more with you. You said nowadays talent is everywhere. It can be in Berlin, it can be in Boston, it can be in Bangalore. And I think any of these places, and there's a million more that have very, very great talent. So I just want to put out a proposal to say that we'll say that, or we'll decide to do a distributed team and not work from one single office. From my perspective, talent is global by now, and we are just missing out if we limit ourselves to Berlin or Bangalore. I would love to come to Bangalore, by the way, and visit you, but I think we're limiting ourselves significantly too much if we say we have to be in an office, and with Corona, we're actually not really allowed in an office anyways, so we might as well take this and leverage it as a strength and say we go entirely distributed. I don't really like the word remote, because remote is like there's a remote village somewhere in the middle of nowhere and it's far, far away from where all the action happens. Yeah. That's why I prefer distributed teams. And we literally say, hey, wherever you are, we want to work with you as long as you are fantastic at what you do. And it enables people to have their own rhythm. As I told you last week, I recently had my son, which means I like to start rather early, or he likes to start rather early into his day. So I'm starting my days really early, but then I really love taking a break between 12 to 2, just to have some more quality time with him. And I think that is much easier when we're working distributed. If that's okay for you, that would be my suggestion. Then we can move to the tools.
Super easy, Philip. You made my life super easy. Then with this approach, two things largely. Number one, we would be able to get the talent very quick, and we can start working immediately. Leave all sorts of visas and the Corona situation, the legal implications, so on and so forth. That's the first thing. The second thing also is like the adaptability. The more we are getting distributed, the more raw talent that we're going to get as quick as possible for our product WHU BSc. Fantastic. Yeah. Let's
cool. Then maybe can you quickly tell me let's quickly just jump into tools. I think we'll be rather aligned on this, but which tools would you suggest us using?
Yeah, so there are hundreds and hundreds of tools that are available. Okay, and rather I'll also put it across kind of a blog that I've had, or a link. I'll share it with you, Philip, and your team as well. But to keep it on a high level, there are 4 key tools that are required. Of course, the first most important thing is, like, we have to communicate, right? So how effective the communication has to be, with minimal amount of disruption and lot of nuisance. The second thing is, like, what is the tech stack? What is the future level tech stack that is required? And to build that particular tech stack, what are the product tools that gonna give clear clarity on the requirements, business needs, market needs, user pain points? And largely, I should not be telling this, keep it as a secret, the no-code platforms, because these no-code platforms can do a lot of minimal requirement stuff, with super ease. I don't have to kill the time from my back and front end developers. I can just work on the no-code platform. So you can also work on it, and we can work together and take it further. So I'll share this with you. So on a quick note, Slack and Notion are amazing. Discord is also, like, literally coming up very well with communication, tech stack, Ruby on Rails, JS for front end, Ruby on Rails for backend is great. Product tools, Figma is great. Jira, I would not prefer for our stage, but still it is great. We can go ahead. Miro is superb. No-code tools and no-code platforms are a secret. Don't share it with anyone. You have Webflow, Airtable, Bubble, so on and so forth. We can
actually, I have a friend who built a complete business on Bubble. Not true. He built a complete business with 7 developers, and then at some point he got so fed up with how slow things were moving with his development team that he decided to recreate the whole software, the whole community at the end of the day in Bubble, and let go 5 of the 6 developers.
Yeah, I know where you're coming from now. So
I think it's amazing what you can build with those.
Right. So if it's only for next 3 months, we wouldn't have hired any engineering team, and somehow we would have managed this. But we are looking out to build a unicorn. So yeah, Bubble would work, and it is going to have a shared capacity, right?
Yeah. Are there any famous last words? Is there anything that you would like to make sure I do that makes your life as a developer easier?
So it's a good question. What do you think about it?
So from my experience, and there are a lot of this we've already discussed, I love avoiding meetings. So a meeting like this can happen initially to align, but afterwards, especially if we're going distributed, which means we could have people sitting in Australia and others sitting in Canada, I think it makes a much more sense to write down more or less everything. And that's why I'm a huge fan of Notion. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. I think Notion is great to have persistent information, to have Slack is fantastic for quick discussions, but when a discussion comes to an end and the decision is made, it should be documented in Notion, because Notion is significantly more persistent. It's an absolute pain in the ass to find information in Slack a month later. That way, if we write everything, we not only do what most companies actually did now during Corona, which is they took whatever processes and things they did in their physical offices and just moved it online. So we had 6 hours of meetings while we were still in an office. So let's just have 6 hours of meetings online. I cannot tell you how much I hate having video calls for too much time. So I think this just enables us to work asynchronous, to think things through as well. So when we have to make a decision, we don't have to make sure that everyone has time, which takes at least 5 days to schedule it, then hope that everyone actually is on top of their game and really puts their mind and soul into this meeting and isn't thinking about something else, and that we don't miss anything. We can say, okay, here's the decision to be made. Let's take 24 hours to discuss it. I can think about it. I can think about it while I go for a walk with my son. I can think about it under the shower, and then I can give my opinion in a very structured manner, which I just love. For me, super important also that we are as inclusive as possible. With the development team, we had this discussion before.
Right.
Inclusive, of course, being also on all the different topics that are really important on gender, sexual orientation, personal background, religion, whatever it is, but also inclusive in a sense that I don't want developers that are code monkeys. Because if I have a developer that just is with me because I pay them the most money right now, they're going to leave me as soon as they find another company that pays 5,000 euros more a year. So I want to be inclusive. I want to integrate the developers into the product work, into understanding what is really our customers' pain, because then I feel the motivation and the dedication is significantly higher. And for me, it's always about outcome, not output. I don't care if something only takes you 4 hours and you take the rest of the day off. If you've done your task, fantastic. Take a break. I don't expect FaceTime. It is a concept that is just absolute bullshit. I expect results. And when I work as a developer, you should never pull me from the zone. So when I'm focused, every developer I know has these huge headphones, and they don't have them because they're audiophiles and really love the perfect sound of whatever music they are listening to. Usually, especially back in the day where we were all in an office, it was the big red sign saying, "Do not disturb." It was the biggest sign they could come up with, and we could come up with. And yeah, so whenever, yeah, I think it's super important that developers really have time to think through a problem and to work productively on code. But I hope you agree. Do you have anything you want to challenge or add to that?
No, I just can't agree more. In fact, I would propose a discussion that you should take my engineering team further and showcase, like, you know, the empathy that what a product leader can build upon for the engineering team. This is so good. Though I hate you professionally, but I'm super happy, you know, to look into these words, mate. And Philip, thanks a lot for your time. I really had a great discussion with you. Looking forward to work further and take our WHU BNB, you know, creating great value for our community and also for the people. So with that, further ado, probably, you know, we will pass it on to I think Garrett, and probably we'll take a break. I think we have run, I mean, we are like 15-20 minutes late with our timeline already. So yeah,
all good. Thank you, Vamsi and Philip. Thanks for a ton of content there. So everybody knows I've already been getting some questions in there. I'm gonna start at the top, but this question kind of came in early in the conversation. It's from Chris Rosa, Chris Rose. Chris Rosa, are you there?
Yeah, hi.
Did you want to ask your question?
I'd love it if you could, because my connection dropped and I can't remember what it was.
Gotcha. So Chris asked, outside of business, do you apply the Agile methodology to other areas of your life?
Yeah. Shall I take it? Okay. So yes, Chris. What is Agile methodology? Largely, if you look into it, you should definitely have a team, and you should have something that you want to take it further constantly and constantly iterate, whether it is a product, whether it is a process, or whether it is some sort of a sales proposition. I don't know about life. Of course, there are two aspects. If you talk about life, is that the way individually or as personas we're gonna have a better life day by day constantly? Yes, of course, but not exactly the Agile methodology, but the concept of iterating. You know, if imagine like this: if you are if you are trying to become an entrepreneur, then today your skill set of becoming an entrepreneur might be X, and probably after 15-20 days it should be somewhere around 1.8 0.5x to 1.1x at least, right? Like 10% more that you have understood. You might also become 2x. In order to do that, what certain things that you would look into is like on a daily basis, how are you learning the entrepreneurial aspects, which can be like, how to raise capital, how to pitch, what are the tech tools that are required, how to sell products. So all these things would come into picture. Imagine that is your process on a daily basis. You are improving something, and in 2 weeks, you're going to pitch as an entrepreneur to someone else, to some VC or to some angel. So obviously you would have iterated yourself constantly. So if you are really approaching agile methodology in this, it is like really great. A lot of people might not do, but there are certain business teams that who do agile methodology, or rather I would say like from 80s and 90s sales and marketing teams is where the agile methodology concept has come, because a lot of people used to do this daily stand-up meeting from the sales teams. Every day, if you look into the sales departments, you will have a lot of dashboards like, hey, these are your targets. From X number of targets, 80% of them were met, but were expected to be met, but only 50% of them have met, and these are the reasons. And because only 50% of your targets have met, the next day morning you're going to have the same meeting with your sales manager and sales team and explain like, what are the good things that you have done yesterday and bad things that you have done yesterday, and how you can improve from yesterday to today. So all these things can be helpful. Of course, this can also be useful in multiple business lines, or also for your personal development, for sure. Hope that answers
Yeah, right.
the question.
Yeah,
Fully
I guess,
agreed.
Yeah. Sorry.
Cool.
And I think the one thing I would say or add is, if you look at the 4 principles of Agile: responding to change, individuals and interactions, collaboration, and churning out results and not having a perfect process. I think you can apply this to almost anything. Do I really think about this every day? Probably not. Actually, no. But yeah, it makes sense from my perspective. You can have a perfect plan or you can have a plan that you execute perfectly, but if you're not open to change, when you realize it's a terrible idea, you are wasting your time.
Yeah, right. I guess that was my thinking, that Agile goes hand in hand with continuous improvement and that kind of growth mindset. But I guess so. I try to think in that way and apply that to everything that I do, I guess, in my approach to study. But then at the same time, I find that actually doesn't suit the linear education system, particularly in tertiary, that we go through. So it seems like an agile mindset can maybe be a barrier to, to interfacing with the current tertiary system, which I thought was interesting.
I always, it shows how geeky our household is, but I always joke with my partner that every time I'm in the kitchen cooking, it's an agile process, where you're design deploying and getting feedback and learning whether you can do it again and what you need to iterate on. But I think Chris had the second question in here as well, so I'll just go ahead and ask that for you, Chris, since you rebooted. But he asked, do you think the developer shortage that you guys mentioned is still an issue, given that there's these available tools like no code that will do it for you? Do you still see this as a significant problem?
Less and less. I think it'll become less every year for the next years to come. Still, there is, at some point, it depends. If you're building consumer products, one of the important parts is how responsive is your app or your website, how quick are the interactions. And this is where at some point these no-code tools, as of right now, still are a bit slow. But also this is a matter of time from my perspective. So
Cool.
I think the majority of WHU ideas, I'll be very honest, you can build with any of these no-code tools. And quite a few people have started to do so. have had tremendous success with it.
Vamsi, were you going to add
Yeah.
something? I didn't want to cut you off.
No, it's a straight answer. Whatever Philip said, very true. The whole tech scene or the ecosystem is moving from building large code bases towards minimalizing all those large code bases and creating very small features, small products with maximum amount of no code capacity. That's where there's a lot of movement. Even if you look into imagine we have if you want to build an infrastructure 10 years back, you had to build a whole infrastructure team. It's like it used to be a massive operating systems team and backend team, database team, so many. But AWS has really repaired the whole thing, and you just need to use a product, so you don't require the developer need, and the developer shortage is not an issue. That's one thing. The second thing is you have so many third-party products that are coming in. Like if you are a small time micro entrepreneur trying to build kind of a seller-based business on Amazon or on eBay, you can either to use Amazon tools or just use these no-code tools. You don't require any dev guys. So there's a lot of work that is happening, massive amount of work that is happening, where there are these products coming in, so that people who want to just start a tech business, they don't need any tech guy anymore. Of course, if you want to scale, you want to build a large database of multiple segments and multiple transactions, which is like millions in data, you definitely would require at this particular stage. But largely to launch a product and build an MVP, no, it is really going off.
Yeah, I saw an interview not so long ago with Mark Cuban, and he was being asked about the how developers are in such high demand, and he was talking about with the growth in machine learning, AI, and no code, that the developers will potentially become obsolete in the future, and the jobs in highest demand will be the philosophers that are teaching the AIs how to think.
That's also another reason why we are having this session. Thanks to Garrett, because you need to understand as an entrepreneur, like how do you think about communicating with the developers, or how do you think about the processes in order to build something either on your own or work with the developers. Definitely, it is just going off down the line.
I want to add to Chris's question on one thing that you guys didn't touch on, which you touched on a little bit about the size and scope of a team and what kind of skill sets are needed. But with tools out there and resources out there like GitHub and Stack Overflow, where you can actually get a lot of function and code, are you finding that team sizes are shrinking in general as a result of that, because people can just kind of grab other code and plumb it and put all the parts together?
Definitely. I mean, what Vamsi was referring to already, just 10 years ago, you needed a whole team just to keep up your infrastructure, and to provision your servers and set them up and keep them updated and working nicely together. Now AWS, it's 10 clicks and $5 later, and all of this is working.
All right, so I think the next question I've got up here is from Frank Heimberger.
Oh, yes.
Frank, can you see your questions? Would you like to ask them?
Yeah, I will do. Also concerning the teams, the developer teams, tech teams, from which countries do you get the best or the cheapest teams and so on? You mentioned some countries, but where are you looking for, and which are the best countries to look for? And the third question would be, what is your experience with the remote developing versus the single development in one location?
Maybe I can start taking it on. So Frank, this is to put it across clearly, talent is available everywhere across the globe. Thanks to the technological capabilities that and internet and so on and so forth, anyone can, learn tech programming, and then they would be able to provide their services to anyone on planet Earth. So it is definitely not like, hey, these are the countries that are better in that compared to other countries. But if you go with the volumes, the sheer volumes, right? So the growth economies, which are largely technological oriented, you can talk about Russia, you can talk about India. These days, you can also talk about a little bit with Vietnam, or sometimes a little bit with either Brazil or Peru. But largely, if you're talking about volumes, yeah, India and China are like they will beat the world, right, by volumes. By demographic dividend, India is like at an average age of 26 for 850 million people. It's like massive, and most of them are clearly tech prone. So you'll find that. But at the same time, what is your necessity and need? It totally depends. For example, if you go to Ukraine versus Bangalore, uh, 10 years back, Bangalore would have got better talent because of the access and because of the ecosystem access, better talent. And also those days, economically and per capita income was much lower. So the same way, the purchase power parity was also lower. But today, the similar capabilities you've got in Kyiv with Ukraine, um, but in Bangalore, uh, because of the technological landscape that has scaled and the volume of developers are also available, the price has also increased. Literally, the way Bangalore or people from China that they were charging 10 years back, today they charge almost on par or a little above that we get in US developers. So, but then once again, it goes back, is that only price versus performance? You might get things done much quicker from certain people. So it's not exactly only this particular country and this particular region. It is for you, what is your current need? If you say like, hey, I'm going to launch my, let's say a meal kit product in Middle Eastern market. So meal kit product in Middle Eastern market, then probably you have to work with Middle Eastern regime, those operations. So your operational timelines can be closer to Middle Eastern, which can be like the developers coming from Egypt. You have great amount of tech community building in Egypt, or certain amount of developers that might be coming from Sri Lanka or India, or if it is, or you also have from Israel some amazing tech teams and consulting companies. So you can look into that, so that if a person living in Middle East who has a technological capability better can provide better solutions for the Middle Eastern market rather than a person sitting in Ukraine or even in Bangalore. You know what I mean? So it depends on your needs, and you have to understand those nodes and pinpoint those needs. So definitely gone are the days where people were running towards India or Philippines or China for the technological teams. Now it's everywhere available, and you have these platforms like Fiverr and so many third-party freelance platforms. They made the leveling ground, the whole ground level, because you have amazing talent from Pakistan coming in, and there is a price war between a Pakistani developer versus an Egyptian developer. So you choose it. You have all the ratings that is coming from Fiverr and all these tools. So you have so much of answers coming in.
Okay.
This is what I think. Yeah, that also should encapsulate towards remote development or decentralized development. I think we are getting into a world not just because of Corona, also because if you have some great access towards tech, or a collaborator, you might have, for example, if you are from Munich, you might find a developer in Munich, but you might find a developer specifically in your meal kit, or online subscription based model and experience, probably from France. Then why can't you work with them rather than waiting for the developer in Munich? So there's a lot of change that is happening thanks to the world leaders and young entrepreneurs. They're also being flexible. but definitely, you know, if you find someone within Munich itself with the same leverage and experience, then that's amazing. So that's where, you know, decentralized talent is gonna knock the doors much harder going forward.
Okay.
Yeah, that's from
Thank you.
Thanks, Vamsi. I'll just add something to that really quickly, because I owned a software company in Eastern Europe, and I've hired developers for distributed teams in India and the Philippines and in Ukraine. And, you know, one thing to keep in mind too is what stage is your business in, and, you know, how deeply aware are you of the requirements that you need? Because the earlier stage the business and the more uncertainty about what you want, the more kind of having a shared vision and being on the same page gets really important. In those situations, having good communication and limited language barrier is helpful, at least having a common language. Sometimes, you know, if you're building a consumer product, you know, being able to find developers that can also think a little bit like an entrepreneur and think in terms of product and not just in terms of code. You know, if you're building a small feature or something, you could go to, you know, a kind of code farm in some country and get it for pretty cheap. But depending on how hands-on you need those people to work with you and extract a vision from your head, I think plays a pretty integral role as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Next question came from Nicholas Brockman. Do you want to take that, Nicholas?
Yeah, sure. Hi, guys. Thank you, first of all, for being here. I think I might take my first question first, then pass it on to the others, and maybe at the others later. So you talked a lot about buy versus build, about hiring developers and stuff, which is interesting because that's like the exact situation my co-founder and I find ourselves currently in. What happens is after about like years with developers, some of them who were referred to us, others who we cold called from over LinkedIn and stuff like that. We both have a business background, so it's very hard to evaluate what these developers are stating on paper, what their capabilities are. And you know, Lagon, for example, last year, so I feel like I still at least have a basic understanding of what I should ask for, but still I find it very hard to grasp what I should ask the people for, how I can really evaluate their skills that they are stated to have. And maybe you can indicate if you have some proxies that would be worth looking for.
So from my perspective, one of the easiest proxies is, can they explain what they want to do in terms that I understand them? It's a fantastic, there are amazing developers out there who really are absolute experts in their field. But if they need the guidance of another absolute expert, then they're not the right person for an early stage startup. In an early stage startup, I need a developer who can communicate exactly with me. Okay, this is what we're going to do, and here's why we're going to do this, and here's how long this is going to take. These estimations are a bit rough, how long it's going to take, but that is absolutely critical from my perspective. Second one is look at previous work they've done. So have them really walk you through, okay, what did you do most recently? Then they'll say, okay, I worked on this and that, and then dive deep into, okay, what was your contribution? What did you work on? And really, really understand, okay, what was their part in it? So I worked on the search for Google. Okay, fantastic. But what was your part? Did you work on the on which part of the algorithm did you work? So I think this is super important, because then you can challenge, or you can understand, what did they work on, and is this something that you probably need as well, or is what you need actually something entirely different? And then honestly, what I usually do is have 2 or 3 days, up to a week, where I just hire them on a freelance basis for a very low rate. So something around 400 euros a day. And I tell them, listen, here's the deal. If I end up hiring you full-time, I will make up the money you lost as a bonus. You get this bonus directly at the end of the first month. But this way we have a week where we get to know each other and we see whether this works out. If it doesn't, no harm, no foul. You got some money. I honestly got the code that you develop in a week won't be what makes or breaks my company. But we've gotten to know each other much better, and then that way you can much better assess whether someone is a good fit for you or not.
Yeah, I also have something to add on. Only I can't disagree whatever Philip has said. Just before the last point, what Philip has said, because you both, Nicholas, you guys are business co-founders. I have gone through this particular situation some time back when I was not super strong in a new technology, and I had to hire them. And now it's super clear. There are so many people who's also following the approach. Take resort of a technological friend that you trust, who's been a developer or who's been a technological guy, a technological leader or engineer, and whatever technological aspects that you need to assess, give it to him. You guys understand, his or her problem solving skills. You guys understand his or her, attitude, motivation, or how well he or she is sync with you. But the technological skills and aspects, you pass it on to the friend that you're leveraging. There were also, certain small aggregators who can also do this, but it is always better if you are able to tap your network with your references and reach out to that technological person. Or if you have a friend, that would be the best thing. So that will solve at least 30% of your problem, not just to hire them, and also your mindset, like, hey, this guy is cool, and really you can take it further.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. I want to pass the mic over to Mohammed El Bassioni. I think you had a question.
Yes, indeed. Hi, everybody. So I would like rephrase my question. Like, I'm seeing like in the demo you showed, the team is like very small, so the dependencies on everybody is very, very high. So how would you, as an entrepreneur, like deal in such a situation when somebody fell short? So somebody went sick, or like is even quit the job. So, and you have like very limited and stressful time plan. So what would you do here?
Okay. So it's important question, right? You remember during our conversations, one of the most important aspects Philip has highlighted, that you have to keep on hiring, and also you have to keep on working with the current team, and also look out to keep on hiring to understand and mitigate your gaps, or to understand the particular risk, which is like, imagine that your work has to be done by 3 developers. Then you try to have or hire 4 developers or 4 engineers or 4 people team, let's call it, so that you have a buffer of that 20% if someone falls back. That is one thing. The second thing is, this is not, in startups, it really doesn't work like, like in large big tech companies, or large companies who's having a technological department, because you will wait for another 2 weeks for something to move further. So here the expectation also is like, if someone is not there, then you also stretch a little more. As a team, you guys try to share the work further and stretch it ahead. And that's where the leader would come. If the leader is like, CTO over there, the CTO might come, jump in and try to work on that particular code and try to help the team make it further, ado in order to take it faster. So it's simple. It might sound very complex, but if you take it into normal terms, it can be simplistic at the start, that there is no time limitation. We don't work on real rules. We try to take it further as much as possible. If someone is falling off, we would be able to cover up them with someone else, and we should be able to stretch as a team a little further. At the same time, as a leader or as an entrepreneur, if you require 3 people, rather hire 4 people. Then keep that, we call it that as a contingency percentage, keep that contingency to at least 20% to 25%. Yeah. So that's how it would go. And that's where.
So building on this, sorry, Vamsi, building on this, I fully agree with what you say. In an early stage startup, you have a buzz factor that is less than optimal. You have too few people with too much work. The one thing I can highly recommend is also to make sure you cross-train and your developers cross-train. So they spend at least 2-3 hours per week just explaining to each other what they're doing. This is especially important for infrastructure. So if you have only one person who has access to AWS and that person, goes AWOL for whatever reason, then you have a huge problem. So make sure you cross-train and you have the important logins. Either there's 2 of them, or you have them stored away somewhere where you can access them, so you are not completely fucked when someone for whatever reason is not available anymore. Everyone, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Garrett, thank you so much for organizing. Vamsi, it was so much fun, and I hope we can do this again. And please keep the questions coming for Garrett and Vamsi. I'm really sorry, but my son is calling.
Thanks, Philip.
Thanks a lot, Philip. It was a pleasure.
Take care, everybody.
Wonderful. All right, well, we'll continue on. We only have a few more questions on the list anyway. So Vamsi, you're on the spot for these, buddy. The next ones, or maybe the next 2, are actually from Madhusudan. Are you there? Ah, there you are. You're on mute though.
Yeah. Sorry. Vamsi, hi. Thanks. And also to Philip, thanks a lot for the insightful discussion. So my question is related to how do you reinforce the customer-centric approach with the technical teams? I understand that doing an attitude sanity check during hiring could be useful, but to keep them more and more engaged and focused on customers' requirements rather than falling in love with their tech and their features. I mean, do you have some kind of, in your experience, do you have some kind of a mock exercises or something which could be helpful? Because our software is not Airbnb, so that's not going to work for us.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the transitions that has happened in the industry, if you look into over past 1 or 2 decades, is like, our engineers have transformed themselves, just looking at tech, rather from that they have moved towards, understanding the customer tenacity, the needs of the market, the problems and pain points for the customer, and then they start understanding it better so that they can code it better. And that becomes one of the key aspects if you are hiring in startups, or even as your first engineer hire. They should be like super customer focused, not just him, your whole company. It's not just Amazon. Largely all companies that have become successful are only the ones, or mainly the ones, who have become super customer obsessed. With engineers, there are certain metrics. Let's not talk about frameworks, but there are definitely certain ways that you would be able to take that approach. Approach A is like, whenever you are doing, as a product guy, you are collating a lot of requirements, or as a CTO, you're collating the requirements. You have your team. Pick up that particular persona who's going to lead that particular team, or if there is only one developer, pick him or pick her, and get them into the initial discussions from the time user research is done. At the same time, the design specs are coming. Gone are the days where only the requirements or the markups were provided to the engineering team, and then you just code it. Of course, there are startups, high growth or maturity startups, who are doing it, but it's definitely a bad practice. An engineer should be of a product mindset. A persona would be of a product mindset if that particular engineer is given access to the pain point of the customers. How would you give that particular access? By collaborating with them or bringing them, with during the interviews that you as a product guy or as an engineering head are taking any sort of interviews or interactions with the person. That's one. Second thing is, be very clear with the decision making in the product roadmap and product strategy. So first, to talk about product roadmap or product strategy, is a product roadmap or product strategy would help any particular product to take it further in terms of market needs, how it is taking care of the revenue, how it is able to enhance or meet the business targets, at the same time being super technologically capable or flexible. So that's where product strategy is coming into picture. Bring them all together there. The third one is in the tactical aspects. You already have this product backlog and sprint backlog, which is like, Scrum meeting or a sprint meeting you have. So there you are anyways, if you're following that particular methodology or theoretical methodology, you are anyways giving that leverage to these engineers to think or talk about or put on their comments that, hey, for a user called Gerrit, in order to do a payment from, SEPA integration, we would not be able to do that. Let's go with Stripe because of these particular reasons. So that's still the customer mindset. So that's where bring them early in the early stages itself, but they might not own that particular early stage piece of product strategy, but they're participating still.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Vamsi.
I want to make sure everybody gets a chance, because Vamsi is already it's already past midnight in Bangalore, and he's so kind to stay up so late. But I do see a question from someone that hasn't asked yet. It's No Sakari. Are you there? I see your name. I don't know if there you are.
Yep.
Do you want to ask your question, mate?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So how do you prevent developers from running off with an idea that's yours or selling it on to a different founder, and you basically creating a competitor for yourself by working with a developer? Are standard NDAs enough to protect yourself from this?
Sure. So I'll tell you a situation that I used to have a huge fight or an argument with argument with my CEO in the past, that he wanted to hire engineers from the competitive company, from a competitor. But, if this particular existing engineer has to go to the competitor, there would be an NDA. How fair is that? It's not really fair, right? That's one thing. The second thing is, when a developer is creating certain amount of code, definitely for that particular code base and repository, there should be certain amount of restrictions that the same code cannot be copied and then sell it to the market. That thought process is there. However, think about GitHub, think about Stack Overflow, or if you're not known to these particular products, these are the products which are like, open source products, where any developer from any company can have their shared repository or a code that they are writing into their own accounts, which might also have certain amount of access to provide that particular information to someone else, which also happens. Like you can imagine, 50% of the times it's an open secret. It's not even a secret anymore. 50% of the developers spend at least 60% of their time to go to Google or Stack Overflow to copy the code. They take the code and put that particular code into the standards of the particular company that they're working with. So all these access of, hey, can we copy the same code or do it or not? It's very open secret now. It is more about how quickly a company is building that particular features and taking it. So let's take another example. You have Amazon, right? And Amazon has, 3 sellers selling the same t-shirts, using the same platform like Amazon. How are they able to do it? They don't even have the developers. So it is not just about the code anymore. It is more about how well you are able to meet your customers' demand, how well you are able to bring your analytics, how well you are able to understand the data and do decision making, and how you are able to make your product much more innovative, much faster than others. So it is all about that. So that's where, you know, a lot of transformation has happened. Still, you can have the NDA so that, you know, I can't just download the .exe file of my Java and take it and go to some other company and push it. So that's why you require NDAs. But largely it is open everywhere, you know, that's what. Hope that answers your question. As an entrepreneur, don't worry about selling your pitch to others. The more your product is out, the more it is reaching out to more people, the more customer centric. If it is, the more it is reaching out to more customers, you would be ruling that particular game rather than only worrying about, you know, if my code is being copied by someone else. Actually, that should be developer's headache, not an entrepreneur's headache.
Okay, okay.
Great point, Vamsi. Yell it to the world. That's where you get your most learnings. Guys, I know there's probably a few more questions in there, but so Vamsi can get a good night's sleep. I think we're going to cut it off here. But as he mentioned, feel free to connect with him on LinkedIn. Is that right? You're still okay with that?
Yeah, I've also shared my LinkedIn link over here. Guys, reach out to me. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Jared, yeah.
No, thank you. It's also in the email for the event. Vamsi and Philip's LinkedIn's are in there. Feel free to connect with them. I'm sure they'll be kind to answer any questions. For those of you that are still stuck around to the end, thank you so much. We'll be having our next event next month where we'll be talking about incubation and acceleration and introducing the new WHU accelerator, as well as having some managing directors from a few top accelerator programs in Europe. But thank you guys all for being here. It was great to see some faces, even though we can't see you in person, and hope to see you again next month. Until then.